Hello, welcome back. We are into the series of lectures number 12. Virtually, I think I have covered to a large extent tension related problems, normal reaction or normal force related issues. And then in my last lecture, I try to give you the complete information regarding the spring forces and its characteristic features. Now, the final of the four that I promised to cover is friction or frictional forces. Now, this is, of course, something that I'm going to dwell at length and in complete detail, and I want you to follow each and every minute point pertaining to this. I don't want you to get confused with this friction. That is very, very important. There are many misnomers regarding this friction. What is that? Now, first of all, before I discuss anything, I'll talk of this misnomer. Friction basically is two types. A sliding friction and a rolling friction. I want you to be very careful. Sliding or rolling, the words are again misleading. If you think that this is associated with the sliding friction, you are mistaken. And if you think this is associated with only rolling friction, you are equally mistaken. In fact, even many of the textbooks do give like this is very unfortunate. I want you to understand friction from a totally different perspective. I'll describe that. What is a sliding friction? Why is it due to? And what is rolling friction? And why is it due to? Now, this is due to relative roughness of surfaces in contact. Now, this is very crucial. When you have two bodies in contact, if you look at their surfaces at micro level, when you view it through a microscope, you will find several undulations. It is never smooth as it appears to our naked eye, remember. A picture that I tried to give you even during discussion of normal force, if you remember. Now, there is, in this particular case, some of these troughs and ridges get entangled. The trough is caught in that crest, and when the two molecules of different substances, this may be of the same material, but the molecule of this and the molecule of this, if they come within that molecular range, they will have an adhesive force. Adhesion, the word is used because the molecules belong to two different bodies, maybe of the same material, it doesn't matter. So, what happens when I try to move this body? There are two things that I have to overcome. What are those two things? One, interlocking of troughs and ridges. There is I told you, if you have an interlocking of this, if I have to pull this, I have to work on this force. two intermolecular attractive adhesive forces. Even if they are not in contact, if they are getting close, as I said, if they fall within that so-called molecular range, then there is a force of attraction between them. So in order to move it, you have to break these bonds. You have to break these bonds. These two put together constitute what we call as sliding friction. So if somebody asks, why is sliding friction due to? Your answer must be due to the relative roughness of the surfaces in contact. And these roughnesses, what do? There is an interlocking of troughs and ridges of the two surfaces in contact. Number one. Number two, the intermolecular attractive adhesive forces which form a bond, and you have to break that bond. In order to overcome these two forces, you have to apply certain force here. That force is what we call as frictional force. It's not frictional force. There is a frictional force developing, and you tend to move it, it starts manifesting itself. Friction is different, frictional force is different. Friction is a concept. Force is something that it develops. It develops only when you make an attempt to just move the body, either successfully or otherwise. The force that develops here, which you have to overcome to move it, is what we call as frictional force. Precisely, sliding frictional force. Let us see what is rolling frictional force. Rolling frictional force is due to relative softness of surfaces in contact. Softness opposite is hardness. Roughness opposite is smoothness. Don't get confused between softness and smoothness. Soft and hard. The road that you are walking on is relatively hard. If you want to walk on a sandy surface, it is soft. Now you see how effectively you walk on a sandy surface, very difficult for you. Whereas if you have the ability, you can walk very freely on a rigid, hard surface. The more the softness, the more is this friction. Now this is a very important point. Supposing I take a hard surface, this is a hard surface, and if I place somebody, see, there is nothing called a perfect hard surface, and there is nothing like a perfect soft surface. Remember? Supposing when I know it is not perfectly hard, I place a body, then this is bound to undergo some depression. Now I repeat, when I place a body here, there is some degree of softness, there is a more degree of hardness. It is all relative degree, remember. Nobody can say this is a perfect rigid surface, perfect hard surface, or for that matter, there is a perfect soft surface. So when I place this body here, this says the surface is bound to undergo some depression. If it were to be flat, what could have been the direction of normal force perpendicular to this surface? Alright? Now you see what is happening. I'll show you here. Okay? Now, when I depress it, the normal force is directed like this. So you can visualize two components. One is, in this case, vertical, another is horizontal, that is against the direction of motion. Because it tends to move, therefore it presses. So, in order to move such body on a relative soft surface, you have to overcome the component of normal force that is opposing this overall motion of the body. Be very careful of the words I'm using. First of all, what could have been a hard surface? Generally, if you place a body, we say that's the normal force. When I'm trying to move this like this, but it can't be straight and rigid. So, likewise, it forms. So the normal force is slightly inclined. Now that has two components. Now this is the component I'm talking about. Whenever that is soft and you have a depression and the body intends to move like that, it has to overcome this component of normal force. And this component of normal force is what we call as rolling friction. The name could have been different than rolling. You know, in physics, it is sometimes very difficult to fathom and understand why they use certain words. They may have certain reason, but unfortunately, the books that we read never give any reasonable clarification on that. We know rolling motion, as colloquially we speak, well, that has nothing to do with rolling friction. Rolling friction. What is rolling friction? You should understand. It is nothing but the component of normal force that opposes the overall motion of the body. Overall motion of the body, that is important. So that is very, very necessary to understand. What it does oppose is, it opposes overall motion of the body. That is what we call as rolling friction. Now the rolling friction is predominant when you have deflated tires. You know, the tire bursts out sometimes. Very difficult to move the body because the rolling friction becomes enormously high. Enormously high. But for the surfaces that we talk in general, the surfaces are reasonably rigid. Therefore, rolling friction is negligibly small. Otherwise, rolling friction, sliding friction, they coexist. You never come across a perfect smooth surface. You never come across a perfect hot surface. Any surface I take, it is to some degree smooth, to other degree rough. The same surface, to some extent it is soft, to some extent it is hard. Therefore, due to softness you will have some opposing force. Due to roughness you have some opposing force. Therefore, both types of friction are always present. Always present. And that's one very, very important point. Before I discuss anything technically, some misnomers you have to remove. It is never confined to rolling friction, nor is it confined to sliding friction. Both are always present in nature. How do you know that friction is present? Now this is, see, we won't see what we see today. But for friction, life would have been impossible. Life would have been impossible. Now, why I'm saying, I'm going to such an extent of saying life is impossible? The ones that we have learned in our school days, our science teacher used to say, the friction is a monster. It is there to oppose you. So be careful. So friction will never support you. It will always oppose you. The first wrong concept is this. Friction supports. Friction supports motion. If people think that it doesn't support, as I say, things that are available in abundance, we never realize its importance. I am telling you openly. Anything that is present and available, and as long as it is with us around, we never realize its importance. Mother, father, you can see. As long as they are there, they are not allowing me to go out, they are not allowing me to watch a film, they are not allowing me to go and play with my friends. What is all this? You are very much upset, etc. So did I. When I was also doing the same thing. But when we lost, I lost them. I know what is happening. And I know what am I missing. Any amount of my cry doesn't get them back. Please, my dear friends, never lose the opportunity to avail and give services to parents. Very important. Now, many people who get up in the morning during the olden days invariably used to pray to Lord Sun. Irrespective of your religion, you may be anyone that is immaterial to me. As they call, you may be a Hindu or Muslim or Christian or anything. Why? Without sun, the closest star to us, life is not possible on earth. Life is not. After all, you made the life available to us. Therefore, I pray. Why do we pray parents? Because it is they who gave life to us. So we pray, we should pray them forever. They are what we call as Pratyaksha Daivam. You have got to, first of all, worship your parents before you worship anyone else in this world. Because they gave life to you. Sun gave life to you. Now you are in some room. I remember some of the films I think they showed. He is called, hey, come on. And before he enters this room, a lot of oil is spilled all over the room, full of oil. So the boy comes running, and then the moment he puts his foot on this, he tries to put it, and then how does he run? He'll push it back and try to go forward. But when he pushes back, there is no grip because oil is spilled all over, and he loses and then falls and somersaults he'll have. It's such a dangerous game that some of the children play. And suddenly you realize who the bloody on this earth has actually spilled all this oil. Till the other day, when you were playing, running and all that surface was reasonably rough and which was making you allowing you to run, walk, etc., you never realized its importance. When did you realize its importance? When it is not there, because roughness is removed, the so-called smoothness is created, and since you are unable to walk and run, you lose your balance and fall out, so you are upset. Not one example. You find some a good mango that you want to pluck and then now bite and eat. Imagine no friction. What can you bite? Nothing. What can you write? Nothing. What can you hold? Nothing. Imagine suddenly God appears and He says, I don't want this bloody friction. You remove the friction. He suddenly removes friction. You know what happens? All the cars that are moving keep on moving on. They can never stop. They can never stop. Because friction is not there. And whoever is at rest cannot move because there is no friction. It's a wonderful concept. So, I personally say, Son for giving life, parents for giving life, friction to lead the life. Otherwise, there is no life. You have to pray friction every day. Sometimes, in excess you may not relish. The same thing we do. Sun is required for us. But the moment it is very hot, you curse sun. That is a natural thing. You love your mom, you love your dad, then but once they say something very seriously, that day you are upset. But that upsetting doesn't last for too long. So you are again back to loving them. You are again back to loving sun. Friction you should love, you should pray, no matter to which religion you belong. Because of friction, I am able to live. It is very important. Very, very important. Now, there are people, whenever something is said, some people take in letter, some people take in spirit, some people take in both letter and spirit. Somebody was saying, hey, God is within you. He is telling the children, God is within you. The dad is talking to son, where do you want to go to a temple? God is within you. Then the students, oh, is it so, daddy? Okay, then I am putting namaskar because he is here. Now I have to, put some money in the hundi. Now this is the hundi, please put money here. Why? He took the letter, not the spirit. So when I make certain statements, take in its letter and spirit. I'm not here to advocate any religion. I'm least bothered. But whatever practices that you may have, but never forget to consider this. Before you do anything, first of all, pray to these four. Son, parents and friction. In fact, we should have a temple for friction. Well, nobody does it. But these people go for temples for MGR, Amitabh Bachchan, so on and so forth. But I have yet to come across a place where friction is worshipped. And we should worship it. We should worship it. You get the point? So first point that you should learn is friction never or rather always doesn't oppose. Most of the times it supports. What it opposes is relative motion. See, remember, rolling friction I will not discuss at any stage in my future lectures also. But whenever I say friction, I mean only sliding. But if there is a reference required, I'll definitely make a point about your rolling friction also. Okay? So, my question here is, you said yes, friction supports. Excellent. What friction opposes is a relative motion. Then I have tried to give you when does this friction arise. Friction never manifests itself on its own unless you make an attempt to produce a relative motion between the bodies in contact. I hope you are able to follow this. Whenever, see, there are two surfaces. One, two. Whenever an attempt is made, whenever an attempt is made to produce relative motion, either successfully or otherwise. You may be able to produce relative motion, you may not be able to produce relative motion, but you are making an attempt. So, an attempt is made to produce relative motion, either successfully or otherwise, then friction manifests itself. Look, it will not come on its own unless you make an attempt. Friction manifests itself acting parallel to surfaces in contact acting parallel to the surfaces in contact. Whenever an attempt is made to produce relative motion, either successfully or otherwise, friction manifests itself acting parallel to the surfaces in contact. This is important. It is a real force. One of the best examples of real forces is friction. This is electromagnetic force. This is an electromagnetic force. Yeah, what kind of force is this? Electromagnetic. It is what? Intermolecular attractive, adhesive, but manifests itself only when attempt is made to produce relative motion between the surfaces in contact. This is very crucial, and I want you to make a detailed note of this. Electromagnetic force, intermolecular force, attractive force, adhesive force, man, it will not be present all the time, it will appear only when you try to do something there. That is about friction. I said it's a real force, right? It's a real force, and then without this, we can't be what we are today. It's impossible. Right. Now, when you say yes, friction is due to all this, we said it is maybe due to intermolecular forces, it may be due to interlocking of the troughs and ridges. That is possible. Fine. Now, friction types. Static, limiting, dynamic, or kinetic friction. static friction, limiting friction, dynamic or kinetic friction. What do you mean by static friction? When there is no relative motion between the surfaces in contact, then you got, if at all you get any frictional force, it is bound to be static. Here, relative motion about to begin. Relative motion about to begin. This relative motion begins. If there is a relative motion, you will get this. About to begin, you will get this. No relative motion, you will get static friction. Second important point. Self-adjusting. What do you mean by that? Let me presume, for this to move, you need minimum 10 newtons, for example. I am applying 8, you will get 8, because balancing. If I get to 7, you will get 7. If I get to 9, you will get 9. If I go to 4, you will get 4. So it will adjust itself on its own. So self-adjusting force. Equal in magnitude to applied force parallel to surfaces in contact. I've just told you, I'm doing a horizontal force applying, and the horizontal opposing here is maybe 10, this is 10, is 5, this is 5, 1, 1, 2, 2, 0, 0. We will call this as Fs, we will call this as Fl, we will call this as Fk in our discussion. Okay? So self-adjusting force equal in magnitude to applied force parallel to the surfaces in contact. What else you can think of in static? Now, this is not self-adjusting. Not self-adjusting. Not self-adjusting. You said it's magnitude. Now it's here, it's magnitude. Fl is proportional to normal force. Fk is proportional to normal force. More the normal force, more is the limiting friction. More the normal force, more is the kinetic friction. No such relation here. In fact, what is the static frictional force? It will depend on several factors, whereas this will depend only on normal force. This also depends only on normal force. And Fl is given as mu Sn or mu, some constant of proportionality, incidentally called coefficient of static friction or coefficient of limiting friction. And here what do you get? Mu k, that is called coefficient of kinetic friction. And this is, of course, I have already given you. No such relation in static frictional force. Now, this is very important. I'll give you various examples of static frictional force. But one thing which you should remember is, it is always a variable force. Always It's not constant. Whereas for a given normal force, this is constant. Here. This doesn't depend on the normal force. Okay? So it's a variable force, self-adjusting force. Right. So you got about 4 points in statistics.